Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my testimony. This is going to be part two. If you missed part one and you want to go back and watch it, it's going to be linked in the description box if you're on YouTube or linked in the comments if you're on social media. So feel free to jump back and start with part one if you'd like, or just start right here. Um, I am so glad that this reached you today, and I hope that you get something out of it, even if you didn't realize you needed it until the moment you hear it. Again, I've written this kind of all down, so if I'm looking down a little bit, that's why. If you feel led, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's at The Sanctuary Well, all one word. And I'll link that in the comments on social media as well. But, hit subscribe, and that way you'll get updated every time I add to my testimony or upload a message that God sends me for you. All right, so I want to tell you more of what he did after everything that I mentioned in part one. Um, hmm, because what he did next, I will never be able to unsee it for the rest of my life. If I didn't already think that everything that had happened to me that I talked about in part one video was a miracle and it was from him, this alone, what I'm getting ready to share in this video, would have done it in an instant. But to be able to tell you what happened, I have to go backwards a little bit for those of you who don't know much about me. Back in 2016, I was on my way home after a long filming day on set. It was late, I was tired, and I had a really long drive ahead of me. And as I was driving home, I began to have double vision. So I pulled over to rest, thinking that I was just really tired from, the long day of filming and the long drive, because I had drove in that morning to film, and it was a really, really long day, right? So I pulled over to rest, took out my contacts, put on my glasses, thinking if it wasn't me being too tired, it might just be my eyes, messed up from wearing my contacts too long. And then I started to drive again after I rested for a while, and it got worse. So I had to call my husband to come get me because I couldn't even see to drive at that point. But I thought it wasn't really a problem. I just needed him to drive me home and get some sleep, and everything would be better in the morning. So the next morning, when I woke up and my vision was still um, split, still seeing double, I knew that something at that point was seriously wrong. Um, Fast forward a few weeks later, several doctor visits, I ended up being diagnosed with a very rare chronic disease called pseudotumor cerebri. Say that three times fast. But basically, what that is it's a condition where your body thinks you have a brain tumor. You don't actually have a brain tumor, you just have excess spinal fluid. But the symptoms that you have mimic like you have a brain tumor. So you basically walk around and live your life with symptoms like you had a brain tumor. That looked like, for me personally, vision issues, dizziness, lightheadedness, headaches that were pressure headaches, more extreme kind of like migraines, a little bit different, sensitivity to light, fatigue, and I had days that made it hard for me to even get out of bed. So for the next 9 years of my life, I was told by doctors that the cause of my condition was unknown and that there was no cure. There was pretty much nothing they could do for me. They were able to keep my spinal fluid pressure relatively low with medicine and lumbar punctures when needed so that my symptoms were minimal. I was grateful, though. My case was actually considered mild. Um, Even with all of those symptoms and the days of staying in bed and just honestly not being able to do anything but lay around some days, I still had the mild case. I didn't have to go get a shunt inserted into my head or my spine or anything like that, like some people had to get their fluid drained. So I was grateful. But with that being said, my vision still crossed nearly daily. Some days were worse than others. And then over the past 2 years, things got worse. I stopped being able to drive at night. I just couldn't see well enough to do that safely anymore. I still did it occasionally when I had to because I was stubborn, but um, realistically, I shouldn't have been driving at night. And I didn't for the most part. I tried to get rides when I could. And then some days during the day, it got really bad. Days filled with not being able to see straight. And when it got to that point, when I would go days on end not being able to see straight, I knew that that was the time I needed to go in and have another lumbar puncture to have the spinal fluid drained out. And that would help me see straight again. And that's just the way it was, like clockwork. Ever since my diagnosis in 2016, it was just kind of like this endless cycle that I got used to, right? So in June 2025, when it got to that point again, in the midst of the fantasy story that I was reading that was mentioned in part one, and everything else happening during that time, um, I feared I'd be heading in soon for another poke of the needle. I just knew it was coming with how bad it was. I was also in the middle of overnight shoots for a movie at the time, and acting is something I'm very stubbornly push through anything for, so I didn't back out of the movie, even though I was at my worst health-wise. So one day, I was reading the story before heading to set to film that night, and the very last part of the story had the words, "Don't worry, you will be cleansed." That was in the story. And as I read that part, my chest did that pulling thing again. But still, I just laughed and I thought, oh, gosh, how I wish, because here I was sitting with one of my worst days ever with my disease and reading those words. I just thought, oh, that hit my heart the right way. I wish I could be cleansed. Um, the drive that day and the shoot that night were hard. They were the hardest I had had in a while, maybe ever in the 9 years of that disease. Sometimes when I couldn't see straight and I had bad days, if I wanted to watch TV or if I wanted to drive, I had to hold one hand over my eye or I had to wear an eye patch because it was the only way to be able to focus. But obviously, you can't do that if you're filming, right? But I did have one hand over my eye that day driving to set because it was that bad, just so I could keep my vision straight. So I vowed that day as I was driving to set that I was going to call the doctor. After filming wrapped and I got back home, that was my first thing on my list. I was going to call the doctor and schedule another lumbar puncture because I couldn't take it anymore. That night filming with my vision being that way, trying to focus on the other actors while my vision is swimming was awful. It exhausted me. If you hear in the background, it's storming outside. And I prayed that my eyes weren't crossing on camera because when I had flare-ups, my eyes tended to cross when I was trying to focus and get my vision straight. So I prayed that I didn't look like that as an actor on camera. But I powered through it because acting is my passion, and it was important to me to do it no matter what. Uh, Even though all I really wanted to do at that moment was get back in my bed and curl up and cry. And this was after my depression was already cured, so it wasn't the depression that made me want to do that, it was the disease. So we got to the last scene of that night of filming. Now keep in mind that I had not read the script in advance for this scene because my character didn't have any lines, okay? So that was a little unusual for me. I just, went in ready to do the rehearsal with the director and the other actors and see what was going on and go from there. So when we began that rehearsal, and at the end of the scene, it was the other actor yelling out, "You shall be cleansed." I froze. My chest started stirring again, and I still just tried to shake it off as a funny coincidence. Just a coincidence that it was so similar to those words that I had read in the story right before I came to set. And that feeling in my chest, it kept getting more and more intense every take that we did. But at the same time, my vision kept getting worse and worse, which I didn't think was possible, but it did. My skin started humming and vibrating, and I honestly had got so dizzy that I thought I was going to be sick. And I had never felt that bad with my disease before. I didn't understand what was happening, but still I powered through and didn't say a word to anybody else on set and just did it, right? And so when the director called for one last take on that scene, this time the other actor went all out and the word cleansed kind of echoed out into the night. We were filming in a, a big clearing on a hill in the forest, and so it echoed really loudly, and I felt it in my bones. So much so that I reacted by closing my eyes when he did it that time, and it wasn't an actor choice. It wasn't something that I planned in advance or anything. It was a pure, authentic reaction, which is what great acting is, but it was probably the most authentic reaction I've had in all of my 11 years of acting, because I just could do nothing else except close my eyes and nearly collapse. And I didn't open my eyes again until the director called cut. And when I did, I swore right then and there that I would never use the word coincidence again. Because when I opened my eyes, everything was clear. And I mean that in that, yes, the double vision was instantly gone, but everything was also brighter. It had never done that. My double vision had never cleared that way. Not like that. Not without going to get a lumbar puncture. And even with the lumbar punctures, yes, the double vision would go away instantly, but colors didn't get brighter. Um, and then sometimes I could get the vision to get a little bit better gradually if I upped my medication, but never instantly. No, not instant. Not in 9 years. And as of the taping of this video, it has been 2 months since that day on that hill when my vision cleared. And in 2 months, I have had no more double vision, not one day of double vision. No extremely abnormal headaches. I've had a couple of regular headaches, but nothing abnormal, nothing that kept me in bed. And as of right now, I'm currently tapering off my medication and not having any issues with doing that whatsoever. Friends, everything that happened to me that I mentioned in part one and in this video happened in the span of 3 weeks' time. That's it. 3 weeks. Depression lifted, skin cleared, 10 pounds gone seemingly overnight without changing anything, vision restored, chronic illness on the way to being in remission, which I was told could never happen. So, yeah, I could no longer deny that this was him. No way. He had healed me in multiple ways in less than a month. I was and am so incredibly grateful, but when it first happened, I went through a period of self-doubt. Not doubting him, no doubt in him whatsoever. I knew it was him. Doubt in myself. Um, because when I really stopped to think about it, my one big question was always, why me? Why do I deserve this? I didn't feel worthy enough to deserve something like that. Yet I was still grateful at the same time. So it's a roller coaster. Um, Shortly after filming wrapped on that movie, I finished reading the fantasy story that kind of began this whole thing. Um, and with everything that had been healed during that time, I thought my life would go back to normal or a new normal for me now. I knew I'd pray more, and I started seriously thinking about going back to church for the first time in my adult life. Because what he had done for me up to that point, that would have been more than enough to bring me back to him. Way more than enough. But yet again, I didn't know that his plans for me were so much bigger than just that. And my story with him was just getting started. There is still so much more to this story. So much more that he wants me to share because someone out there watching this needs to know that your pain is not meant to shatter you. It's not. Even though it feels like it will, and it does, that's not what it's meant to do. You need to know that he has a plan for your life. Maybe it's you that needed to hear that. Or maybe you know someone who needs to hear that and you're going to send them this video. Even if you feel like it's too much or you don't understand. God, I didn't. You don't understand why things are the way they are right now. He loves you and he sees you. There is a purpose in the pain always, which I know is so annoying to hear when you're in the middle of it because I would watch videos that said that while I was in the middle of it, and I just wanted to roll my eyes at the person in the video and say, yeah, good, easy for you to say. So I know. I can relate. It's not easy to hear, but I need you to hear it. There is purpose in your pain, even if you can't see it. And you have made it through all of your worst days, and you are still here. And that is for a reason. Sometimes before he blesses you, he has to make you humble. He has to make you humble before he can give you a big blessing. And I didn't realize that until now. So he wants you to know that your pain is not wasted. He is shaping you for what comes next. That part that you can't see yet. So I will ask you this. What are you going through right now that is hard? Tell me about it. What is it exactly that makes it feel like you're breaking apart? That you're shattering? I know. Now my question is, how do you come to him in response to that thing that you just told me about? What do you say to him about it? What do you ask him for? There are no wrong answers here, friends. This is only a nudge from him to you through me. He wants you to stop hiding your wounds. Cry if you need to. Get angry if you need to, even if it's at him for a minute. You're not wrong for feeling that way. Let those emotions out, but then, and here's the trick, don't leave it at those emotions. Ask him for peace through it. Ask him for strength to get through it. And just say, God, hold this for me. Help me hold this. Give me the strength to hold this until this season of my life is over. so that I can get through it and see all the good you have coming to me. Because one day, you will wake up and see what it was all for. If you're listening, and if you trust him, one day it will be revealed what it was all for. But it'll be in his divine timing, not ours. So this was the point in my story where he started to pull me out of some of my hard times. And when I finally stopped denying him, he came to me, he found me, and eventually over time, he started to answer that big question I had of, why me? And so in the next part of this testimony, I will share with you how chest pulls and healing turned from, moments of miracle and healing and things I couldn't explain to fully feeling God's presence in my life for the very first time. In a big way. In more than one big way. See you in the next video, friends.